It's May 10th, 1954 in Dayton, Ohio. Inside a packed conference hall at the Institute of Radio Engineers, one expert after another takes the stage, explaining why silicon transistors are still a distant dream. The temperatures required are too extreme. The material is too difficult to work with. The audience is beginning to lose interest when a soft-spoken physicist from an obscure Dallas oil exploration company steps up to deliver his presentation. The man is Gordon Teal, a physicist working for a little-known company called Texas Instruments. With complete composure, he tells the audience, "Despite everything you've heard today about silicon transistors being years away, I just so happen to have a few in my pocket." He slips a hand into his jacket and pulls them out. Fully functioning silicon transistors already being manufactured. In an instant, the entire room goes quiet. The company Gordon Teal represented wasn't founded to build electronics. Its original mission was to listen to the Earth in search of oil. What happened between those beginnings and its rise as a technology powerhouse became one of the most remarkable transformation stories in American history. You're watching American Electronics and Tech, where we uncover the stories behind the companies that shaped the modern electronic world, right down to the circuit boards and the engineers who brought them to life. If you enjoy stories like this, be sure to subscribe and leave a like, because the company that gave the world the microchip began by using sound waves to search for oil underground. The journey from that unlikely beginning to changing technology forever is even more incredible than it sounds. In 1930, physicist J. Clarence Karcher and engineer Eugene McDermott launched a company in Dallas, Texas, called Geophysical Service. Their specialty was reflection seismology, a technique that sent sound waves deep underground to reveal hidden oil deposits. Oil pioneer Everett Lee DeGolyer invested $100,000 to help get the business off the ground, but the industry's unpredictable nature made growth difficult. By the end of the 1930s, the company had restructured, with its geophysical operations becoming a separate subsidiary known as GSI. On December 6, 1941, the day before the attack on Pearl Harbor, 4 GSI employees, Eugene McDermott, J. Eric Johnson, Cecil H. Green, and H. Bates Peacock, acquired the subsidiary. Just months later, the company was producing electronic equipment for the U.S. Navy and the Army Signal Corps. The durable field-tested enclosures they had originally developed to protect oil exploration instruments proved to be exactly what the military needed for radar systems and anti-submarine operations. The war fundamentally changed the company's direction. Then, in November 1945, a young former naval officer named Patrick Haggerty, a summa cum laude engineering graduate from Marquette University, joined the team. Haggerty studied GSI's growing electronics business and recognized an opportunity that few others in Dallas could see. The company's future wasn't in discovering oil. It was in the electronic instruments they had created to make those discoveries possible. In 1951, the company adopted a new name, Texas Instruments. Annual revenue had reached about $20 million, but in the rapidly growing American electronics industry, the company was still largely unknown. Patrick Haggerty, however, had a much bigger vision for what came next. In 1952, Patrick Haggerty convinced crystal physicist Gordon Teal to leave Bell Laboratories and join Texas Instruments. At Bell, Teal had mastered the process of producing ultra-pure semiconductor crystals. Although Bell Labs had invented the transistor in 1947, those early devices relied on germanium, a material that came with significant performance limitations. Silicon promised to handle much higher temperatures, but no one had yet figured out how to purify it well enough for practical use. Missing his home state of Texas, Teal accepted Haggerty's offer to return and build TEI's Central Research Laboratories from the ground up. What few people realize is that a Bell Labs chemist named Morris Tannenbaum had already produced a working silicon transistor in January 1954, about 3 months before Gordon Teal's team achieved the same milestone. But Bell Labs decided the manufacturing process wasn't practical for mass production. Both accomplishments deserve their place in history. Tannenbaum built the first working silicon transistor, while Teal and chemist Willis Adcock created the first silicon transistor that could actually be manufactured and sold commercially. The team successfully tested the device on April 14, 1954. Just 4 weeks later, Gordon Teal walked onto the stage in Dayton with those working silicon transistors tucked away in his pocket. Patrick Haggerty had a much bigger ambition. He wanted the transistor to become a household technology found in every American living room. In May 1954, Texas Instruments built a prototype transistor radio and began pitching it to manufacturers. RCA turned it down. Philco wasn't interested. Emerson also declined. One by one, the industry's biggest names passed on the idea. The only company willing to take the chance was a small Indianapolis manufacturer, the Regency division of Idea. On October 18, 1954, the Regency TR-1 was officially unveiled, and by November it had reached store shelves with a price tag of $49.95, about $550 in today's money. According to Consumer Reports, its audio was acceptable for spoken broadcasts, but disappointing when it came to music. That hardly mattered. Around 150,000 radios were sold because, for the first time, people could slip a radio into a shirt pocket. Just as importantly, the transistor became a household word, and teenagers suddenly had a portable soundtrack they could carry to the beach and beyond. Throughout the decade, Texas Instruments' annual revenue climbed from about $20 million to more than $92 million. But the transistor radio was only the opening chapter. The breakthrough that would truly change the company was still ahead, and it would come from an engineer who ended up spending his summer at work because he wasn't allowed to take a vacation. In the summer of 1958, an electrical engineer from Great Bend, Kansas, named Jack Kilby, arrived at Texas Instruments. For years, he had been thinking about one of the biggest challenges in electronics: wiring. Computers of the time depended on thousands of hand-soldered connections linking individual transistors, resistors, and capacitors, and every extra connection increased the chance of failure. Kilby believed there was a better way. If all of those components could be built from a single piece of semiconductor material, the need for complex wiring could largely disappear. Having just joined the company, Kilby wasn't yet eligible for Texas Instruments' mandatory summer vacation. So, while the rest of the engineering team headed off for 2 weeks, he remained alone in the laboratory, surrounded by quiet workbenches, a stack of ideas, and the uninterrupted time to put one of them to the test. When the engineering team returned on September 12, 1958, Jack Kilby was ready to show them what he had accomplished. Sitting on his workbench was a crude-looking assembly of germanium, gold wire, and aluminum that combined a transistor, a capacitor, and 3 resistors onto a single piece of semiconductor material. By later accounts, it looked more like a homemade science experiment than a revolutionary invention. But appearances didn't matter. It worked. Texas Instruments filed a patent application for the invention in February 1959 and introduced the new device at the Institute of Radio Engineers convention the following month. Most attendees didn't grasp its significance, but one company did: Fairchild Semiconductor, where Robert Noyce had been independently pursuing the same idea. In July 1959, Noyce submitted his own patent for a silicon-based integrated circuit. The competing claims led to years of courtroom battles before the two companies ultimately agreed to share recognition and cross-license the key patents. Today, Jack Kilby and Robert Noyce are both credited as co-inventors of the integrated circuit. But it was Kilby who, working alone in a Dallas laboratory during the company's summer shutdown, assembled the first functioning prototype by hand. In 2000, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics. During his acceptance speech, Kilby acknowledged that Robert Noyce, who had passed away in 1990, would almost certainly have shared the honor if he had still been alive. Only 6 of Kilby's original integrated circuit prototypes are known to exist today, and one is preserved at the Smithsonian Institution. Throughout the late 1950s and into the 1960s, Cold War defense contracts provided the financial foundation for Texas Instruments semiconductor research. The company developed airborne radar systems, missile guidance technology, and laser-guided weapons. Behind many of its groundbreaking innovations was the steady flow of military funding that helped drive its research and development forward. Patrick Haggerty, never one to stay still for long, once again challenged Jack Kilby to find the next big breakthrough. This time, he wanted a consumer product that could showcase integrated circuits the way the Regency radio had introduced the transistor to everyday Americans. Kilby teamed up with 2 engineers whose names are often overlooked in popular accounts, Jerry Merriman and Jim Van Tassel, and together they focused on building a tiny electronic calculator. The secret project was given the codename Caltech. By 1967, the team had created a fully working prototype. 5 years later, in 1972, Texas Instruments introduced the TI-2500 data math to consumers. Then, in 1976, the TI-30 arrived on store shelves with a price of just $24.95 and went on to become the best-selling calculator ever made. Its simple display message, showing the word error, became a familiar sight that an entire generation of students would remember for decades. Then came the invention that would turn Texas Instruments into a household name, something no semiconductor breakthrough alone could ever achieve. In November 1976, engineer Paul Breedlove received a challenge: use a $25,000 budget and just 3 months to find out if a single chip could produce human speech. Working with Gene France and Richard Wiggins, Breedlove's team created the TMC-0280, the world's first single-chip speech synthesizer. The voice used for the system came from Dallas radio announcer Mitch Carr, whose clear and steady delivery made him the perfect choice for the recording. The team transformed the technology into the Speak and Spell, a bright orange educational toy featuring a small keyboard, hundreds of built-in words, and a robotic voice that celebrated correct answers while calmly guiding children through their mistakes. Texas Instruments called it the first time the human voice system had been recreated electronically on a single piece of silicon. The device was unveiled at the Consumer Electronics Show in June 1978 and launched with a retail price of $50. 4 years later, Steven Spielberg placed the Speak and Spell in the hands of a stranded alien in E.T., the Extraterrestrial, transforming the little orange device into one of the most memorable pieces of consumer electronics of the 20th century. In 2009, the IEEE recognized it as a major milestone in the evolution of electrical engineering. The TMC-0280 speech chip also found new life beyond toys, powering everything from Atari arcade machines to Chrysler vehicles. But as consumers watched a tiny chip find its voice on toy store shelves, Texas Instruments was quietly moving into a new market, one that would eventually push the company to the edge of collapse. In 1979, Texas Instruments launched the T99/4, the first 16-bit home computer to come packaged with a color display, carrying a price tag of $1,150. Hidden inside that ordinary beige box was the beginning of the company's biggest crisis, and almost no one at TI realized what was about to happen. The threat came in the form of Jack Tramiel, the founder of Commodore, and he had not forgotten what happened years earlier. In the mid-1970s, Texas Instruments had crushed Commodore's calculator business by cutting prices to levels the company couldn't compete with. Nearly pushed to the brink, Tramiel fought back by purchasing MOS Technology, the semiconductor company behind the 6502 processor, giving Commodore the ability to design and manufacture its own chips. When the personal computer boom took off in the early 1980s, Jack Tramiel turned TI's own strategy against them. The TI-99/4A entered the market in June 1981 with a price of $525. Then Commodore cut the price of the VIC-20. Texas Instruments responded with a price drop of its own. Commodore lowered it again. The battle continued. By February 1983, the TI-99/4A had fallen to just $150. By the summer, Texas Instruments was offering an even cheaper beige model for less than $100, losing money on every machine it sold. The company's Lubbock, Texas facility was producing and shipping 5,000 computers every day, but moving products out of the factory did not mean customers were buying them. Texas Instruments' decision to enter the price war can be viewed from two different angles. One interpretation is overconfidence, the idea that dominating the market through sheer production volume would eventually lead to victory. The other is a matter of economics. Commodore controlled its own chip manufacturing and could always cut prices $1 lower. In reality, both explanations contain some truth, and the full story only makes sense when both sides are considered together. The third quarter of 1983 delivered the final judgment. Texas Instruments announced a staggering $330 million loss, with almost the entire collapse tied to its home computer business. In October of that year, the company revealed that production of the TI-99/4A would come to an end. The remaining machines were cleared out at prices that fell from $50 to just $20 each. Thousands of employees lost their jobs as TI pulled back from the market. The company that created the integrated circuit, the pocket calculator, and the first speech synthesizer chip had come dangerously close to collapse. It nearly destroyed itself by selling home computers below cost in a battle for a market that was ultimately controlled by someone else. But Texas Instruments survived. It did something far more difficult than simply avoiding failure. It stepped back toward the one area where it had always been among the best in the world, designing and building the chips themselves. The consumer spotlight faded away, replaced by a quieter business built around analog semiconductors and embedded processors, the hidden components powering products made by other companies. It was not the kind of work that attracted headlines. It was about endurance first, and eventually it became a different kind of dominance. Today, a working TI 99/4A can still be found powering on in the homes of collectors across America. Hobbyist programmers continue creating new software for a computer that was discontinued more than 4 decades ago. Original speak and spell devices still trade hands online, and the voice of Mitch Carr continues guiding children through mistakes and encouraging them to try again. Texas Instruments calculators remain a familiar sight on the desks of high school students nationwide. A quiet kind of dominance, so common that most people barely notice it exists. Today, nearly a century after Karcher and McDermott first used sound waves to explore the ground beneath Dallas, Texas Instruments has grown into a global technology giant. The company employs around 33,000 people, generates close to $18 billion in yearly revenue, and carries a market value approaching $280 billion. New semiconductor manufacturing facilities are being built in Sherman, Texas, expanding the company's future capacity. The tiny integrated circuit Jack Kilby assembled by hand during a quiet summer in 1958 went on to become the foundation of modern electronics. It now lives inside smartphones, automobiles, medical devices, satellites, and countless intelligent machines around the world, often hidden behind another company's name, but connected forever to the company that helped create it. The company that helped create the microchip nearly destroyed itself by selling home computers for less than the cost of producing them, yet it survived by returning to the one thing it had always mastered better than anyone else: the technology inside the machine. The chip itself. In 1954, Gordon Teal walked onto a stage in Dayton, Ohio, reached into his pocket, and revealed a glimpse of the future. 7 decades later, Texas Instruments continues to carry that legacy forward, quietly powering the technology found in pockets around the world. If you grew up with a Texas Instruments calculator sitting on your desk, a speak and spell waiting under the Christmas tree, or a TI 99/4A connected to the family TV, share your story in the comments. Tell us which model you had, what year you got it, and whether it still powers on today. The people who used these machines understand the impact of what Texas Instruments created in a way no financial report ever could. Subscribe if you want to help us continue preserving these stories with us.